Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. I'm Debra Jason with the Marketing Blab, and I am also the author of Millionaire Marketing on a Shoestring Budget and DebraJason.com. And for many of you who've been on my shows before, you know I'm always excited. And one of the reasons is usually my guest is someone that I've never met in person. And today's guest is Bob Burg. And Bob was on a Blab with a colleague of mine, and I so enjoyed listening to him that I reached out and was honored when he said, yes, I'd be happy to be your guest. So Bob is the author of The goGiver, as well as the book that I have, which is goGiver Sell More, also Endless Referrals, and sold millions of books, which is quite an accomplishment from a fellow author who has not sold millions. So Bob, thank you for being here today. And
thank you.
What would you like everyone to know about you that they may not know so far?
I don't want them to know anything about me that they might know.
Well, I can think of one thing I'm not sure if everyone knows, and this is one thing I really like, is that you're an animal lover.
Oh, yeah.
And you're a big supporter of the Furry Friends Adoption Clinic in Florida.
Yeah, absolutely. Got my little Calvin, the cool cat, sitting over there, just kind of sleeping away and trying not to pay attention to Daddy on the Blab. No, I guess if there's one thing about me a lot of people don't know that surprises them is I'm very much an introvert. Unless I'm speaking in front of an audience, I just assume be alone or with a couple of very close friends. I really enjoy my alone time. So when I'm not on the road, I really hardly ever leave my house other than to go to Dunkin' Donuts and have a cup of coffee and reading, but very, very introverted.
Well, then it's good that you're comfortable in your home today. And thank you for joining us. I'd like to ask you, some people who were responding to me as I was promoting today's Blab said, well, what is a goGiver? So for those people who are not familiar, why don't you share a little bit about what the goGiver is and what the goGiver philosophy is?
Sure, and it's based on a book, a business parable, co-authored with John David Mann, who's a fantastic guy and fantastic storyteller. And really what a goGiver is simply someone who understands that shifting their focus, and this is really the key, shifting their focus from getting to giving. And when we say giving in this context, we simply mean constantly and consistently providing value to others. And that doing so is not only a nice way to live life and conduct business, it's a very financially profitable way as well. And so a person who does that in accordance with the 5 laws that John and I share in the book, that is what a goGiver would be.
Well, in the book, I want to read, in the goGiver Sell More book, you talk about value. And you said, or you and John, I should say, wrote, your job is not to make a sale, but to create something else, value. In fact, as a salesperson, you can define your job description in 3 words, I create value. But the question comes up with that of, what does that mean when people say value, and how can I make money if I'm always giving things away?
Well, you're not giving things away. That would be one of the things that, is kind of confusing when they hear the goGiver, right? It's
right.
What do you mean? Paying yourself up? No, not at all. In fact, goGivers tend to charge higher because they sell on value rather than price. So a goGiver tends to sell at the top end of the price scale. What we need to understand when we talk about value is its differentiation from price. Price is a dollar figure. It's a dollar amount. It's finite. It is what it is. Value, on the other hand, is the relative worth or desirability of a thing, of something, to the end user or beholder. In other words, what is it about this thing, this product, service, concept, idea, what have you, that brings with it so much worth or value to someone that they will willingly exchange their money for it and be ecstatic that they did while you make a very healty profit. Now, in the story, we use we utilize Ernesto Iafrate, the restaurateur, his cafe. And it's it's a nice restaurant, and it's a high-end restaurant in a swanky part of the city, as it's described. And you go there to eat, you're gonna pay quite a bit of money, and but the value you receive in the overall experience makes it much more worth it than just the price that you're paying. For example, you might pay $150, $200, who knows? But what do you receive in exchange? Well, from the moment you step into the restaurant and you're greeted, you feel like $1 million, and you are escorted over the table in the proper way. The wait staff has been trained to deliver such great service and knows when to pay attention to you and when to kind of back off and leave you to enjoy the experience. The ambiance is fantastic. The food is out of this world. Everything about it is quality and experience. So you may have paid, $150, $200, but you've come away feeling like you got, thousands of dollars of value from that. Now, so you receive more than what you paid, right? But here's what also happened. Ernesto Iafrate, the owner, well, certainly his food cost him a lot less than what he sells it for. Keeping the doors open, his staff, the electricity, everything that goes into a restaurant cost him altogether much less than what he's paying for it. So he's making a very, very healthy profit. So when we talk about the law of value, we say don't focus on the money, because if you focus on the money, you're not going to put that value into it. The experience isn't going to be what it can be. If you focus on pleasing that other person, if you focus on the value. Now, this is why we say that money is simply an echo of value. It's the thunder to value lightning, which means nothing more than that the value comes first. That's the focus. The value comes first, and the money you receive is simply a very natural and direct result of the value you've provided.
Well, let me ask you this. Since, my book is about cost-effective marketing, one of the questions that comes up is, how does a person add value to others without it costing them too much money?
Mm-hmm. Well, there are, of course, you're an expert in that field. I'll give you my take on it. There are many ways to provide additional value to people, or to communicate value on the process to the sale beginning. It's when you first meet someone. It's your focus being on them rather than on yourself. It's asking them questions that help them feel good about the conversation. It's maybe having online, it's having a special report or an audio and a video that you are able to give to them. This is something that you give for free, because you're attracting them to you in order to get to know who you are, so that they can feel good about, but it's also of great value to them. You're not giving them an infomercial, you're giving them something of fantastic value that's going to want them to get to know you better. Once you are doing business with someone, or in the entire process, value tends to be communicated through 5 what we call elements of value. And they are excellence, consistency, attention, empathy, and appreciation. And to the degree that you're able to communicate that, that's the degree that that person feels great about you. They begin to know you, like you, trust you. And that's the degree that you take price out of the equation.
Well, I love that, because I talk a lot about the know, like, and trust factor. And I know you do as well. And, that's what people want from each other. They want to like each other. They want to know each other. They want to trust each other. But if they've had a bad experience, they might be a little hesitant. And, one thing you talked about in the goGiver Sells More book was about being real. And I also talk about that as well. It's like being authentic, being true to who you are. But one point I wanted to cover that you talked about was the comfort zone. And a lot of people talk about going outside your comfort zone. And I want to find the page where you wrote something about that. And you said, rather than try to leave your comfort zone, perhaps you can just be where you are. Only change your comfort zone by stretching it a bit, growing it, enlarging it, making it big enough to include the other person. Instead of stepping out of who you are, step into who you truly are. And I really like that. It was a new way to look at the whole step outside your comfort zone. And you talk about, you don't necessarily need to be uncomfortable. Do you want to expand on that a little?
Yeah, well, life presents enough uncomfortable situations for us that we need to handle, that we don't need to try and create them. However, obviously there's a time and place for everything, and there is a time, of course, to step outside your comfort zone and to do those things. But the point we were trying to make is rather than focusing on that, instead focus on expanding your comfort zone by simply being yourself, including others with you, and then build on your small successes. Because we don't have to, and typically success is not the result of one huge leap. It's typically the result of a combination of failures and then small successes, and failures and small successes. And well, we should learn from our failures, obviously, but we also need to be encouraged by our small successes and build on our small successes. And then our comfort zone, which started here, kind of goes up to here, so we can operate within that comfort zone, but it's an ever increasing comfort zone. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and actually, if I think of my personal experience, I had, last week I had some, I don't know if I'd call them failures, but some down days,
Yeah,
and what I did was when the weekend come, I sort of gave myself permission to just let it go. And then on Monday and Tuesday, I started making some more phone calls, and some things happened that were really upbeat and positive. And it was like, you know what? Some days you might feel uncomfortable, and it's okay. Go with the flow. And then tomorrow's a new day. You can start fresh.
That's right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So
Great.
let's, real quickly, before we open up the seats, because we have some limited time today, why don't you do a quick review, if you can, of the 5 laws. Excuse me.
Sure.
That
the laws
talk about.
Yeah. The laws themselves are the laws of value, compensation, influence, authenticity, and receptivity. We sort of talked. The first law, the law of value, says your true worth is determined by how much more you give in value than you take in payment. Now, we kind of explained that doesn't mean you're giving yourself away. It doesn't mean you're not making a profit. It simply means you're giving more in use value to that person. In other words, they come away from it feeling like they got much more than what they paid for, while you make a very, very healthy profit. Mm-hmm. Law number 2 is the law of compensation. That says your income is determined by how many people you serve.
There you go.
Huh?
You're back. You froze up over here for a bit.
Oh, sorry about that. Law number two is the law of compensation. And this law says your income is determined by how many people you serve and how well you serve them. So where law number 1 says to give more in value than you take in payment, law number 2 tells us that the more people whose lives we touch with that exceptional value, the more money with which we'll be rewarded. In the story, Nicole Martin, the CEO, tells Joe, the protege, that law number 1, hey, it's great, the law of value, that's the foundational principle, but that alone is not enough to make a great income, because it's not enough to just provide value to one person. Ernesto would go out of business in his restaurant if he had only one customer. So it's all, law number 2 says, hey, it's the number of people whose lives you impact with that exceptional value, and that equals your compensation. Law number 3 is the law of influence. And this one says your influence is determined by how abundantly you place other people's interests first. Now, please understand, this is not meant to say, you should be anyone's doormat, all right? Placing other people's interests first. Doesn't mean you should be a doormat, a martyr, or self-sacrificial in any way. It's just that as several of the mentors tell Joe, the protege in the story, what we call, and what I've built my business and all my writings on in the last, 25 years, I was going to say 30 years, I guess 25 years, is that what I call the golden rule of business, of sales, of networking, which is simply that all things being equal, people will do business with and refer business to those people they know, like, and trust. And there's no faster, more powerful, or more effective way to elicit those feelings toward you from others than by stepping outside yourself, moving from what we call an I focus or me focus to an other focus, looking for ways to, as Sam, one of the mentors in the story, said, make your win about that other person's win. Okay. Law number 4, the law of authenticity, which you mentioned before. It simply says the most valuable gift you have to offer is yourself. One of the mentors, Debra, shared that she learned early in her sales career that all the skills in the world, the sales skills, technical skills, people skills, as important as they all are, and indeed they are all very important, they're also all for naught if you don't come at it from your true, authentic core. Mm-hmm. But when you do, when you, as John and I like to say, when you show up as yourself, day after day, week after week, month after month, people feel good about you. They feel comfortable with you. They know you, like you, trust you. They want to be a part of your life, a part of your business. Mm-hmm. And then finally, the law number 5 is the law of receptivity. And this one says the key to effective giving is to stay open to receiving. And this is really nothing more than saying that, hey, we breathe out and we also have to breathe in, right? You know, all the giving in the world, all the giving of value is all for naught if you're not willing to allow yourself to receive. We get so many messages from the world about that, you know, money is a bad thing, and if you built a business, it was on the backs of others, and this, and so many negative messages. No, in a free market-based environment where no one is forced to do business with you, the only way you can make a lot of money is by providing exceptional value to the lives of others. Otherwise, they're not going to do business with you. So if you have money coming to you that you have earned through providing value to others, you've earned it, and it's a great thing. So what we say is focus on the value, focus on the giving, mm-hmm. Allow the receiving.
To receive. Well, that's a great summary. Real quickly, we do have a question, and I want to see if the person who's asking that, here she comes. This is my friend and your friend, Sabrina.
I love Sabrina. Oh.
So we're going to get Sabrina on here, although I'm not seeing her yet. Come on, Sabrina. Sabrina, one question, or maybe. Sabrina, are you? Here you are.
Here's my awesome Sabrina.
Hi.
Hi. Thanks for joining us. This is the first time Sabrina's hopping on a Blab.
Awesome.
Thank you, Debra, for inviting me. Hi, Bob.
Hi, Sabrina. How are you?
I'm great. It's so good to see you.
You too.
So, Sabrina, you had a question for Bob.
Yeah, I am curious, which would you say is the most difficult law for professionals to grasp or implement in their business or life?
Well, it's a great question. And I think the one that seems to be the hardest for everyone, just about, is the law of receptivity, law number 5. There's so many people who say, yeah, you know, the giving part, finding ways to provide value, touching the lives of others, placing their interests, being myself, yeah, I can do those. But boy, what a tough time with that receptivity. And it's a great point. And it's because, again, the messages we receive from the world regarding abundance, or I should say regarding lack, is so prevalent. It just comes to us all the time. So we need to be studying prosperity. I subscribe to Randy Gage's Prosperity blog and his Prosperity TV. And I made sure to watch every one of those messages that he put out because, again, the lack stuff comes to us in the news, it comes to us in movies, it comes to us in TV, it comes to us forever. So we need to place ourselves within the environment of prosperity and give ourselves an opportunity to bring it in and fill our minds with that prosperity. So I believe people should be reading books on prosperity. They should be, watching things on the internet and listening and so forth to keep pumping that good information into our minds.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, thanks for coming on today, Sabrina. I'm so excited that you were here. Something that comes up when you talk about that, Bob, is in my head, I thought of law of attraction and manifesting. Is that kind of what you're talking about when you tell people, read about prosperity, do things that sort of manifest it in your life?
Yeah, well, I think, it's funny. There's a kind of, I think, a misconception sometimes talk about the law of attraction and so forth, because, even in the movie The Secret, which I thought was a great movie, and I enjoyed the book very much, the one thing that was kind of left out was the action part. And I think a lot of people got this idea that if you only want something and desire something badly enough, and if you just keep those vibes going, it's going to, well, you know, even in his book, even in his 1910 book, The Science of Getting Rich, Wallace D. Wattles talked about the fact that through thought, you attract things, but it's only through action you're able to meet up with it. So, yeah, I mean, so I think the law of attraction is a wonderful thing, but we've also got to remember that we have to do our part and be willing to work. Now, once we get to that point and the prosperity is there for us to receive, we've got to allow ourselves to receive it. In his wonderful book, and it written in 1960, Psycho-Cybernetics, Dr. Maxwell Maltz talked about how the mind works based on the belief systems that we've grown up with and based on the belief systems of how we see the world. And it's really on a very subconscious, unconscious level. So if we have a bad relationship with money, if and again, it's on a subconscious, unconscious level, and we don't believe money's a good thing, or we don't deserve it, or people with money are bad people, or they're unhappy people, then what happens is we can attract all we want. We can go after all we want. We can have everything coming. And we're going to find a way to sabotage it because our mind, our unconscious is not going to allow it to happen. So that's why it's so important. That's a great book, by the way, written in 1960, Psycho-Cybernetics by Dr. Maxwell Maltz, which shows how and why the mind works as it does and how to reprogram that to be able to get past that. So yeah, so I think it's a little bit more than the law of attraction. We've also got to be able to receive what we attract, and we also attract it through going after it.
Yeah, you know, that's a great point that you bring up, and I'm glad that you did, because there is so much talk, I think, about, you know, well, think about it, manifest it, do a vision board, and I've done all those things, but I always come back and say, well, thinking about it's not enough. You know, visualizing and all that stuff.
It all starts with thought. It does begin with thought, and that's why I thought everything that they put in there was great. It just, you know, somehow, whether in the editing or in the production, and I don't know, because I don't know how that was done, but it was left out that work is a part of it. Action is a part of it. That's why we want people to be go-getters as well as go-givers.
Go-givers.
We want people to be people of action. What we don't want is for people to be go-takers. Because those are the people who sort of feel entitled to take, without having added value to the person, to the process, to the situation. And they tend to be very frustrated because they tend not to achieve the kind of levels of success they feel they deserve. And even those times they do, it tends to be short-lived because it hasn't been built on a solid foundation. So we want people to be, you know, go-getters, people of action, and go-givers, people who are focused on bringing value to others, just not go-takers.
Well, Sabrina, I see you've got the book open there.
I do. I love it.
I have it here too. This is just one of the books. And actually, I'll put the URL for Bob for the website, the goGiver.
Yeah, either the goGiver.com or Burg, BURG.com. And they can connect with me actually a little easier even on that one on Burg.com.
Whoops, I had a typo in there. So it's Burg.com, BURG.com, and I'll put that in the comment section. Let's talk, you know, one of the things you talk about is that question of, you know, will my product or my service or my program make money? And one of the things you say is, well, that's not a bad question to ask, but it's not the first question to ask. You want to expand on that?
It's a good question to ask. It's a great question to ask. It's just a bad first question to ask. I mean, you know, the first question to ask is, does it serve? Which is a couple, and there's a couple levels there. One is it a good, a righteous thing to put out there that people should have? But also, is there a marketplace for it? I mean, you can invent something wonderful, but if nobody wants to buy it, it's not serving. Okay. And if it's not serving, so no one's buying it, you're not going to be able to bring in income from it. And you do need to bring income in. So again, when we say, you know, will it make money? It's just not a good first question. It's still a great question. You have to, if you're in business, you have to be profitable. You can only be profitable though when your focus is on serving others. And to do that, you've got to first ask the question, will this serve?
Well, you know, what about
Is,
those people out there that think, yes, I have something that's great, you know, but they think it's great, but nobody else really does. And so they go out there because they think what they have is something that will serve, and it's really sincere and genuine, but they might fall on their face. And I guess part of that is what we were talking about earlier with success and failure. You learn from it, but it's always good to do some homework beforehand and do some of that research if you can.
right. Well, you know, one of Thomas Edison's inventions was a vote tabulator that they could use in Congress, United States Congress, and in the state, you know, senates and assemblies, which would help everybody see exactly who voted for what, blah, 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 blah. And it would have been perfect. It would have cut their time down. It would have been this. Well, it didn't sell because none of them wanted that. Right. So that's when reportedly he said, you know, I'll never, you know, invent something ever again before knowing, as to the degree that you can know, before knowing there's a market for it.
Well, you know, if he were around today, he'd probably be a good mentor to have. I'm sure he had, you know, a lot of pearls of wisdom that I think a lot of us learn from today. It would be cool to have him in this century to chat with him. But I know you have someplace to go, and we only have a few minutes left. So I wanted to see if anyone else wants to jump on and take a seat. We have a seat that's open. You can ask Bob a question. We've got Jill that's coming on here. Jill's here from Arizona.
Hi, Jill.
Well, hello there. I love your books, all your books.
Oh, thank you, Jill. And I love you.
I'm here without my jammies on this time, Debra.
Well, it's funny you asked that because Sabrina asked me if she could wear her jammies. And I'm like, well, if you want to be on the camera, you may not want to do it. But thanks for joining us. Question?
I came across with the wrong kind of theme at the beginning, so that one wasn't really good. And thank you so much, Bob. Your book resonated with me completely, as does Debra's. And I just, I'm so honored to be here right now. I wanted to ask you a question in regards to, have you had any pushback in regards to presenting the the new thinking that is new to some people, that giving and really sharing and networking in a without pushing sales down people's throats all the time? Do you get any pushback on that?
Yeah, it's a great question. No, not really. There are many people who, in fact, let's put it this way: the early adopters of the goGiver were the people who were doing these things long before the book was ever written. And so, you know, they'd write to John or they'd write to me and they'd say, oh, this is what I've been doing. This is how I built my business. And I've tried to tell people like this. But and so we might have put these laws into a book, or might have put it into a story form. But I suspect that successful people have been doing these things since time immemorial. And what happened then is, the next wave of feedback we got were from people who received the book as a gift from these people who said, you need to be doing it this way. But because it was a third party, a book, you know how that is. Sometimes you can tell something to somebody, they're not who, and they care about you, you care about them. They don't believe you, but you give them something from a third party, and all of a sudden now, right? And I think that's what happened. So you know, while there are people, I'm sure, who look at what we're doing and say, oh, this wouldn't work for me. You know, I mean, it's a big world, so there's always going to be people who you know, who say this. But fact is, it is going to work for them, because these aren't things that John and I made up or invented. These are success principles that have worked for as long as there's been market economies, I would imagine.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for jumping on, Jill. Well, Bob, since we only have a moment or two left, I put in the comment section both your URLs, burg.com and the gogiver.com. How else can people get a hold of you, or are those the two best spots? The best spot?
Burg.com, everything is there on my website. So they can connect with me on social media. They can subscribe to my blog or whatever they want to do. I just welcome you to come by and visit if you'd like. And you know, again, Debra, my apologies, and I do for people who might have come on late. I thought it was a 30-minute blab. I would have loved to have been on for an hour. This has been a blast, and I love speaking with all of you. But it was my fault. We had something else for coming up in a couple of minutes, and totally my bust. And so thank you for your graciousness when we spoke on the phone this morning. You couldn't have been sweeter about it and couldn't have been more kind. And thank you for understanding. But again, my fault, totally.
That's okay. Thank you for taking the half hour to be with us. And for those of you who are tuning in, if you want, Bob said he'll be happy to come back at another time so we can spend more time with him. Thank you, Sabrina, for jumping on. And actually, once Bob leaves, if everyone wants, I'll stay on. I'll go off the record. We won't be recording, but if you have any questions or comments, we can chat some more. So good luck with your next show that's coming up at noon, Bob. Thank you again for taking time to be with us. Again, you can find Bob at burg.com, BURG.com, and that's in the comment section. And Jill, if you want to come back on, you're certainly welcome to, but we have to say goodbye to Bob.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Bob, for being here.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Have a great day.
You too.